The rain had stopped just before dusk, leaving the air heavy and sweet with the scent of wet sagebrush. The dirt road leading to Jacob Callahan's ranch was slick and dark, the ruts deep with mud, but the small wagon pressing forward didn't slow. Inside sat a woman, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the distant outline of a house standing alone against the horizon. Her name was Clara, and by this time tomorrow, she would be a wife. The town preacher had read the vows in the afternoon, simple words in a small church that smelled of dust and candles. Jacob had said them firmly, his deep voice steady, while Clara's had trembled like the wings of a trapped bird. They had spoken little since. She didn't know how to begin, how to speak to a man who seemed carved out of the same earth he worked. When they reached the ranch, the light was fading into a muted violet. Jacob helped her down from the wagon without a word. His hands were strong but gentle, calloused palms steadying her as she found her footing in the soft mud. For a moment, she dared to look up into his face, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes the color of worn leather, a few days' stubble shading his jaw. He wasn't unkind, only quiet, the kind of man whose silences held meaning. "House is this way," he said, his tone low but not cold. She followed him, clutching the hem of her dress to keep it out of the mud. The house was plain, 2 stories of weathered wood and lamplight spilling through the windows. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and faint smoke, the walls lined with shelves of books and tools. It was clean, not spotless, but lived in, as though the man who owned it had never expected to share it. Jacob took her shawl and hung it carefully by the door. "There's stew on the stove," he said. "I'll fetch you a plate." Clara hesitated. "I can serve myself." He looked back at her, studying her face for a long moment. "You're my wife now. Least I can do is bring you supper your first night here." His words were simple, but they carried weight, the kind that comes from a man not used to speaking more than he must. She nodded, her throat too tight to reply. They ate in silence. The only sounds were the ticking of the old clock and the faint crackle of firewood. The stew was thick, hearty, full of beans and venison. Clara ate slowly, still half afraid that at any moment she might wake from all of this, that the marriage, the ranch, the quiet man across from her were part of some strange dream. Jacob finished first, setting down his spoon with a faint clink. He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her. "You're not from around here." She shook her head. "No, Nebraska. My father's farm burned last winter." After that, she trailed off, her voice faltering. Jacob nodded. He didn't ask more. He could see the weight in her eyes, loss, exhaustion, the kind that can't be measured by words. "You'll be safe here," he said finally. That word, safe, made her chest ache. No one had said it to her in years. After supper, she helped clear the dishes, washing them in the basin while Jacob dried. Their hands brushed once, and she nearly dropped the plate. He noticed, his expression softening. "You don't have to be nervous," he said quietly. "I'm not," she replied too quickly, then caught herself and added, I don't know what you expect of me." Jacob hesitated, the towel still in his hands. "I don't expect anything you can't give." Her breath hitched, not from fear but from something else, a strange stirring she couldn't quite name. She had agreed to this marriage out of necessity, not romance. The notice in the paper had been brief, rancher seeks wife. Must be honest, hardworking, willing to start anew. She had written back because she had nowhere else to go, but now, standing in his kitchen, she realized how little she understood about the man she had married, or what kind of life she was stepping into. When the chores were done, Jacob showed her the house, the barn out back, the narrow staircase, the spare room he'd built years ago but never used. He pointed to the small bedroom that would now be hers. "You can rest here tonight," he said. "I'll be in the other room if you need anything." She blinked in surprise. "You're not." She stopped, cheeks coloring. He smiled faintly. "I won't rush you. This place has room enough for both of us to take our time." Something in her chest eased at that. She managed a small nod. "Thank you," she whispered. He tipped his hat slightly, out of habit more than formality, and stepped away. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone with the sound of the wind outside. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, soft and golden, falling across the quilt where Clara lay half awake. The scent of coffee drifted through the open door, mingling with the faint aroma of cedar and clean earth. She blinked, trying to remember where she was, and then it came back to her in a rush. The church, the vows, the quiet man who had promised her safety with no fanfare, no grand gestures. Just the truth in his eyes. She rose quietly, smoothing her hair with trembling hands. Her reflection in the small oval mirror above the washstand startled her. A stranger stared back, a woman with uncertainty in her face and something gentler just beginning to take root in her eyes. She touched the plain silver band on her finger again, as if confirming that the previous day hadn't been a dream. Downstairs, Jacob was already at the stove, sleeves rolled up, frying eggs in a heavy cast-iron pan. The sound of the sizzle filled the small kitchen. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps and gave her a small nod. "Mornin', mornin'," she echoed, her voice still soft from sleep. He gestured toward the table, where a plate of bread and butter sat beside 2 mugs. "Hope you like your coffee strong. Can't start a day any other way out here." She smiled faintly. "I'll learn." Jacob watched her pour herself a cup, careful and deliberate, as though she feared spilling even a drop. She sat opposite him, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the creak of the chairs and the occasional murmur of wind through the open window. After a while, Jacob spoke. "I'm riding into town later. Got supplies to fetch, fence posts to pick up. You'll be all right here." Clara hesitated. "I can help. I used to work the land back home, helped my father mend fences, clean stables. I'm not afraid of work." He nodded slowly. "Didn't think you were, but you've had a long journey. You should rest first." Something in his tone, kind, not dismissive, made her heart tighten. She wasn't used to being given permission to rest. Every day since the fire back in Nebraska had been a fight for survival. Yet here, this quiet man seemed to believe she deserved something gentler. When Jacob left an hour later, she stood by the porch, watching him mount his horse and ride off down the long dirt road that wound toward the horizon. The sound of hooves faded slowly until it was gone. The silence that followed was not empty, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, Clara didn't feel like she needed to run. She spent the morning exploring the ranch, the barn with its hay-sweet air, the co-op filled with clucking hens, the corral where a few horses grazed lazily under the sun. Everything bore Jacob's touch, steady, orderly, cared for. By midday, she was hanging laundry on the line when she saw something glinting in the distance. She shaded her eyes, heart skipping a beat, then relaxed. It was Jacob, returning, a canvas sack slung across his saddle. He dismounted, his shirt damp with sweat, his hat tilted low. "Didn't expect you back so soon," she said, brushing a stray curl from her face. "Didn't take long," he replied, handing her a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Brought you something." She blinked. "For me," he shrugged. "Figured you might want your own cup. That cracked one in the kitchen's seen better days." When she unwrapped it, she found a delicate blue enamel mug, plain but beautiful. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She simply held it, feeling the warmth of the gesture settle in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one's ever thought to get me something like this." Jacob looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "Didn't seem right for you to use mine." They stood there for a moment, the afternoon light painting their shadows across the porch. Clara could feel something shifting between them, something quiet but undeniable. Not passion, not yet, but the beginnings of tenderness, built on small kindnesses and unspoken understanding. Later that evening, clouds began to gather in the distance, the sky turning the color of slate. Jacob went out to secure the animals while Clara lit the lamps and pulled the curtains shut. The first drops of rain began to fall by the time he came back in, hair damp and boots caked in mud. "You always get storms this time of year?" she asked. "Just about," he said, taking off his hat and shaking the water from it. "They pass quick, though. Like most things out here." She nodded, watching him move about the room, the ease in his movements, the way he filled the space without dominating it. She'd known men who barked orders, who used their strength as a weapon. But Jacob's kind of strength was different, quiet, rooted, the kind that made a place feel safe. When the thunder cracked, she flinched. He noticed, pausing by the window. "You all right? Storms remind me of that night," she said softly. "The night the fire started." Jacob crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. He didn't touch her, only met her eyes. "You're safe now, Clara. Nothing out there can touch you here." The words broke something in her. She didn't cry, she hadn't in years, but she felt the tears press behind her eyes. Jacob stood slowly, offering his hand. She took it. His palm was warm, rough from work but steady. He guided her to the fireplace, where the flames danced golden and calm. They stood together, neither speaking. The storm rumbled outside, wind pressing against the windows, but inside, everything was still. When she finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. "Jacob, I don't know how to be a wife."